Howdy, howdy. Sue Devil here, and welcome to my discussion on improving multiplayer. Now, I've been thinking about multiplayer a lot lately and how it's structured and Warhammer in general. And this is just sort of a download of my thoughts. This is not me saying this is absolutely how it should be. There are a lot of just discussion points, things I've been thinking about, and I'd love to hear from anyone else who has thoughts on improving multiplayer in general. It's not a like again, there's no absolutes in here. I just wanted to go over discussion. So this video is all talk, no action. So it's not for everybody, but for those of you who are interested in thinking your way through these kinds of things, I've sort of presented a bunch of points, and it's not as structured as I would like, because it's hard to think about something as big as multiplayer in general. But we'll just get going, and I'll talk through the points and look forward to comments at the end and your thoughts on multiplayer in general, in terms of how it is to play, how you'd like to see it play, and how you'd like to see it from a fan perspective as a viewer. I know I'm a big fan of lots of multiplayer channels, and I would love to see elements in the multiplayer structure to make those games even more interesting. And I know from playing myself, I'll play 5 games and I might be able to cast 2 because the other 3 games are just not interesting somehow, or they're, whatever it is. So we'll go over my notes, and hopefully we'll have some great comments in the comment section and a great discussion. So first of all, Warhammer is completely built around multiplayer. Like, the tabletop is the multiplayer. So putting a significant effort into developing this side of the game is all win. And this is something that CA generally has not put a massive amount of effort into, is their multiplayer. Now, they have some multiplayer based on wargaming right now going out, and it's looking like it's going to be fun and fairly successful. But really, Warhammer is where it's at for the ability to develop this side of the game, and it could be absolutely magnificent and a real strength of the game, and a chance for CA to really get into multiplayer in a very big way, because the armies and the differences and the lore and the game it's based on and the IP is all about multiplayer. So there's tons of opportunity to really do something here. So I just wanted to go over some basic ideas that generally lead to successful self-sustaining multiplayer games. And these are not true in all cases, and these are just some observations and some games that I've played in multiplayer. Like, I played a lot of World of Tanks, which is a great multiplayer game. Hearthstone, I played a lot. I never played League of Legends and Dota 2, but those are good multiplayer games. I played Counter-Strike years and years ago, which was really fun. Quite simple, but really fun. And there are a lot of good multiplayer games and communities out there that are interesting and fun, and I think Warhammer Total War could be one of those. So some basic ideas, they're fun. So not all games played have to be excited, but the potential must be there, and the more games that can be made more exciting, the more successful the game will be. So some basic ideas is the game has to be fun. So things that are unfun have to be mitigated or minimized. So this is a big one. There is a free level entry into them. So not all good multiplayer games have a sort of free-to-play model or a free-to-play entry model. It used to be you'd get 14-day free trials, and then they went to a free-to-play entry. And if you look at games like World of Tanks, it's completely free-to-play, but you pay for special tanks and you pay for faster progression. But yeah, I mean, not all successful multiplayer games are free to play, nor do they all have a free element to them, but this is the case more often than not when you look at really big games like League of Legends and Dota 2, stuff like this, or World of Tanks. These types of games have a pretty strong free-to-play model. Now, I'll go over that model for Warhammer, because I think maybe not the campaign side doesn't need to have a free-to-play entry, but the multiplayer side certainly could be, and it could be limited and structured, and whatever it is to get players into the game, I think would really have an influx of play and would allow this side of the game to be developed on a mass scale, which is really important for self-sustaining, self-perpetuating free-to-play or games and multiplayer and competitive games. So there's always some sort of progression. So this is important. So there must be a reason to play beyond the immediate game at hand. Whether it's ratings, skins, unlocks, or whatever, progression matters. Now, you see this all the time, and even in games that just have skins as rewards, people go for that type of thing. In World of Tanks, you wanted to mark, 3-mark your gun barrel. So, you get 1 star on your gun barrel, and that's, sets you above. You get 3 stars, that's the maximum. You're in the highest percentile of people if you 3-starred your gun barrel. And it's small. Most people are never going to notice it, but you're going to notice it, and it's a goal for you to progress towards. The fourth one is games are fast. Now, not all multiplayer games that are successful have really fast games. Like League of Legends, you can see some games last 45 minutes, but in general, good multiplayer games that are successful, you can pick up and put down in a short amount of time, and the games are fast. Kind of in that 2 to 3 minute range, maybe 10-minute maximum. And Warhammer is really close to setting that and really doing a good job on their games being fast. So the faster the games, the easier it is for casuals to get in and out. More casuals leads to more experts, which leads to more interesting games to watch, which leads to more casuals. It's a self-perpetuating upward spiral. So this includes load times and times to find games, and this is really important. In essence, every second between one game and the next is a wasted second. So everything must be done to make downtime between games as streamlined as possible. And this is really important as a principle for making multiplayer successful, is that you can find games fast and the time between games is minimal. And if you want to jump on, if you have 10 minutes, you want to jump on and play a game, you should be able to. That's really, I think, an important aspect to good multiplayer systems. Now, for this, the network code has to be streamlined. The maps have to be streamlined. Textures and load time streamlined. I mean, everything that goes on between the end of one game and the start of the next has to be streamlined in terms of how it operates and how fast networks can manage it and how fast computers can manage it. So we'll go to even potatoes can run quickly. I know there would be plenty of people that would play this game even if the models were just dots. Like, you look at Dwarf Fortress or Minecraft, as long as they could run it on their computer. I'm not saying make the game ugly, but I'm saying open up the computers that can run the game. Expand the quality of computers that can run some version of multiplayer. Should a $300 Walmart laptop be able to run a version on Warhammer multiplayer on the lowest settings? Yes. That's got to be the goal. Let big computers run high quality, beautiful settings, but provide low settings that weak computers can handle. And you see World of Tanks, that's one of the things. I played a lot of World of Tanks, and I played on a crappy laptop, and it ran just fine. And that's one of the reasons why it's so big, is it's accessible to so many computers. And this is one of the things that CA has been criticized many times for, is their games are not optimized enough and everything else like that. But we can have that conversation. But if you want to really expand the multiplayer experience, you have to expand it to more computers, and that's very important to put a lot of time into. So there are no draws. Great multiplayer games don't have draws. Draws are not fun in any competition, period. How many draws do you see expounded in chess analysis? Not many. Even though most games are draws. Now, I love chess, so this is just something that from what I love. But this does not stop chess from being successful, but it reduces the overall excitement of the game when two players phone it in and agree on a quick draw. Boring, draws aren't great. So I think you could add a castigating rampage system. And this is not me saying this must be done, but you could do this in a very simple way, or something similar. Once the game clock hits a predetermined time, say it's set 10 minutes, it could be 7 minutes, it could be 12 minutes, doesn't really matter. Both players know that after the game starts, after 10 minutes have passed, every 20 seconds, each player has a unit that is farthest away from combat rampage for the rest of the game. So you lose control of that unit and it'll just go and fight. Done. No draws. No kiting draws in the end game. No camping draws. Nothing. If you don't take advantage of the first 10 minutes or the first amount of time you're allowed to make something happen, you are aware of what will happen, so it is perfectly compatible with competitive play. So stats, I think something like that. And it would be quite simple. They have the mechanics into it. So stats, and more stats. So see World of Tanks. So your stats within each faction versus each faction. Overall stats of the game, so you can compare your performance to the general populace. Who is the best player in the world might not be as interesting to me as who is the best dwarf player in the world. And even more so, who is the best dwarf player in the world against chaos? And what units do they generally use as a percentage of breakdown? So I'm just going to flip over to some Watt Lab stats. Now this is World of Tanks. I played a lot of World of Tanks for a few years. I mean, this is maybe like 3 years ago or 4 years ago now, but my stats are still up. Sioux Devil, played like 12,000 games. My win rate, this is a way of describing how much damage you do. Your win rate overall, mine was 56%, and your recent win rate, your last 1,000 games, your recent win rate and win rate rank, and it goes over how many battles, the average tier you played, the victories, etc. And I'm blue in most and kind of light purple in some. So you go over to what does that mean? You go home, and I'll just go to What Labs specifically to show what do these things mean. But this is kind of the idea of putting stats into the game. So if you're in the blue, you're in the 95th percentile, which means you're playing the game better than 95% of all the other players that play the game. And if your stats are in the light purple, dark blue, whatever, you're in the 99th percentile. So my win rate overall was higher than 99% of all the other players in the world that played World of Tanks. Not saying I'm an amazing player or anything, but that's when I look at how I played, the only thing that really mattered to me was the win. These things like doing damage or whatever didn't matter as much to me as just winning. So that's all. I would sacrifice my tank to try and win the game. Everything I did was to try and win, but I had a specific split play style that I played by. So hopefully these all pop up my statistics. But this is kind of shows me, and I can go and look up other players. Like, this is not specifically in the World of Tanks website. They have their own set of stats, but statistics are quite important to allow players to look at their performance. And when I look at the tanks I played like I'm a dwarf. I like armor. I played heavily armored, heavy tanks. I like to go wherever the fight was going to be and brawl all the time. That's the game style that I liked. So the KV-1 was one of my favorite tanks. I have 600 games on it, a 57% win rate. I really like the IS-6, which I bought. The KV-85 I wasn't so good at. You can look at your win rate per tank. I played the Matilda, which is a fun little tank when I first started playing. KV-4 was probably my favorite tank in the game. Tier 8, I blocked tons of damage, 1,400 damage per game, had a good win rate with that tank. And, these kind of stats would go over, and this, for some reason, this isn't filling out. I wonder if I can make it actually fill out so you can see some of the examples of statistics. There we go. So that you can put, and this is something you could easily put into the game. This is a really fun part for a lot of people. Like, I look at, 52% of all my games were played with Russian tanks, because those are the heaviest armored tanks. And I played 41% of all my games in a heavy tank, the very least amount of my games in artillery. I played most of my games in tier 5, then tier 6. You can see the percentage, and you can see your win rate by the country. My highest win rate was with heavy tanks. I played them the best. Your win rate by tier, your win rate over time, this is over the last 1,000 games. Your win rate, which is how much damage you're doing. When I stopped playing, I was still improving. And you can kind of look at those things, see the clans you played in, and these types of things. So I think stats are really good and really important and a fun part of the game. And it would be easy for them to do. I know CA has stats and they use them for balance purposes, but, easy to do. So we go to the capability for players to save their replays to the main database where the stats are housed, which could link back to their opponent. I would love to look through a great player's performance as a faction against faction A against faction B, then click on their replays and watch some, if they have them uploaded to a website. So stats and just gameplay. So rating systems. So rating systems must drive matches and be clear. So ratings need to be driven by multiple elements, not just a win-loss versus an opponent rating like chess, because Warhammer is much more complicated. First of all, you should have degrees of winning and losing. A close loss should hurt your rating less than a crushing defeat. This way, even if you are in a tough matchup, there is still something to play for. And this is really important when it comes to this game specifically. So we should have a weighted rating system such that your total rating is the weighted sum of all your matches with each faction against each other faction. This way the best players in the world would truly be the best in all matchups, not just the best at picking the strongest factions at the current moment of the meta. For example, each matchup, dwarfs versus chaos, dwarfs versus greenskins, whatever the matchup is, would sum to your total rating. So that if you just wanted to play dwarfs like I do, I would never get a good rating for overall, but I could get a good rating as a dwarf, that sort of thing. So it would drive players who are really truly competitive to be competitive with all factions in all matchups, and not just, want to pick matchups where they're going to have an advantage from the matchup pick itself. So you can do that with ratings pretty easily. But you can also make it so players have choice. So players can select their level of play in terms of what faction they're playing and what factions they want to play against or not to play against. So for example, if you wanted to play the dwarfs like I do, and you just didn't, for whatever reason you just didn't want to play against chaos, you could select a box that says not against chaos. It's kind of like counter picking or something, but your game, it'll take longer for you to get a game. But however, I'll read this. So players can select their level of play in terms of what faction they're playing, what factions they want to play against or not play against. However, doing this reduces the potential rating gain, i.e. if you're doing this, you can't gain as many rating points as you could if you're letting the game select for you. And increases the potential rating loss. If I'm selecting just dwarfs against just lizardmen, if I lose that matchup that I've pre-selected, I will be playing for fewer positive rating points, and I will get more negative rating points if I lose. So 4 levels of play. So 1, competitive. So you pre-select your factions before queuing, or play for more rating points by letting the system select for you. So you could select, I'm going to play the dwarfs, and that's who you select before you hit queue. Or you could select random, which will allow you to play for even more rating points, and that'll make the selection and matchup structure go faster. Remember, we want fast games. We want to minimize the time between games and waiting for games to be matched up. So you could select dwarfs or you select random. Then you get into the lobby. You have a set time to select your army now that you see the faction you're facing. 60 seconds is plenty of time for competitive. May not be enough time for other matchups. But it's a point of discussion, so maybe it's in 120 seconds. But both players can agree to start sooner by just hitting the start. So this is competitive. Make them fast and make them set. So you have 60 seconds when you go in to competitive, maybe not casual. So once on the battlefield, again, you have 60 seconds. The clock just starts unless both players speed up the process by hitting start early. This is for competitive, again. So the times could be different. You could discuss the times, but just sitting there and waiting, it has people, two people might have their armies selected in 10 seconds if they load up an army, but they're waiting to be polite to the other player for their game to start. So if you set a set amount of time, it's neither player's responsibility to do this, or you don't need to be polite, and you can just hit start, and if the other player also hits start, you just jump into the game. So basically, these 60 seconds are a maximum, but if you get in, load up your army in 10 seconds, and your opponent does, 15 seconds later, you're loading up, and if you both deploy in 20 seconds, basically you can go from one game to the next in under a minute. That's the idea. So that's competitive. So for casual, you pre-select your faction and your build, then start the match and jump right to the map. Now, this is one thing that for new players or casual players that I think is really important. Not just pre-selecting the faction. I think one of the things that a lot of players like to do, including myself, is to think very carefully about their builds. So if you were playing in casual mode, before you actually hit find the match, you would build your army. So if you're going to play the dwarfs, you would have a dwarf build. You know, you don't know who your opponent's going to be unless you select, I'm going to be playing not against Chaos or specifically against Bretonia. But that would change the kind of rating that you would get out of it, and these would be two different ratings possibly. It's possible to combine them, but the idea being that all this time between games that players can make, you know, the lobby last for 3 minutes would be immediately eliminated in the casual mode. So you would select your faction and build before it started. So while you're loading in, also to make this work, you need to show your unit cards while loading screens or on the map so people can look at them while they're waiting. You get 3 minutes or something similar. Again, you're on a clock, whatever works for casuals, I don't know what it would be, to deploy unless both players hit start early. So you can select a faction, just like competitive, who you want to play against or not against, but you get less rating is at stake. So there should be some casual rating and some competitive, and you might be able to combine these. I'll talk about that in a bit. But if you select, I'm going to play just the dwarfs against just the lizardmen, you might wait 10 minutes to get a game. You might wait 20 minutes. It's your choice. If you want to wait for the game that you want and you want to select that, that's up to you. So that would be compared to near instant matchups if you went to a random selection. I'll talk about that in random mode or unrestricted mode. So if you got the timing right, you could put all players into a single pool where the competitive players would have those timing limits and casual players would have their timing limits, but the casual players would be pre-selecting their army. Maybe you could do it, I don't know, but 2 different sets is not a bad idea. But, you know, the big thing is you match up players based on skill. Simple. The last one is you could have sort of a Skaven/Chaos mode where your army and build are auto-generated for you. It's like an expansion of the auto-gen idea. And you don't find out what your army is until you hit find match. But then you can see your unit cards. Maybe you add 1,000 gold to the army limit because, you know, auto-gen armies are a little weird, and additional rating points for winning. Something that's important to this and I think is valuable is it decouples the responsibility for losing from the player. So if you auto-gen an army and you're just having fun and you lose with an auto-gen army, oh well. But it could also be fun and popular because it can lead to epic games where unlikely heroes emerge. You know, maybe you auto-gen a dwarf army and you get, you know, the Skyhammer, and it turns out that in this game the Skyhammer is amazing, you know, and you just have this amazing epic game. If you lose, so what? You didn't pick it. So it really helps, I think, decouple the responsibility for losing from the player for those people who just want to have fun. Right, who just want to enjoy some of the game and maybe not be so competitive. You could have a mode to do that. You know, you could also make clickables where whatever your army is or your auto-gen army is going to get you into 2v2s and free-for-alls. You know, you could say I'm just playing 1v1s, or you could say I'm just playing 2v2s or just free-for-alls, and you could have those sort of clickables set aside as far as your setting goes. So for free-to-play, I'll show you a bit of the model later, but match based on skill and ping. We want close games against equal opponent with similar lag issues. I think that's pretty simple. You know, if you can match players that are close to each other where there's going to be less lag, then do it. So custom. So the custom mode exists already and it's great. It's very nice. You can build up any game, any map, everything you want to do. So this is something I think is important, is to reduce the factions for multiplayer. And this would be done by, say, for example, combine the dwarfs and by combining Clan Angren and Clan Dwarfs into just dwarfs, or combine all Empire factions into just Empire, Bretonia into just Bretonia, High Elves into just High Elves. And use mutually exclusive selection trees or selection logic to eliminate or open up units. For example, you could select dwarfs, but you can only use the ethereal units if you selected Belegar Ironhammer. This would allow you to For example, there's some Tomb Kings, there's one Tomb King Lord that can use some Vampire Counts units, but make that be grayed out until you select the Lord, and you can use the logic there. The nice thing about that is it does reduce the complexity to anyone. You know, you just got dwarfs, you don't have, like, you would still have everything in custom. Like, if you wanted to play just Clan Angren and custom and get the flags and everything, you could do that in just custom. But in multiplayer or competitive, just combine the factions into one complete set and use mutually exclusive selection logic to look at their units, which they already have available. It is already available to do that. So this will make the lobby simpler and make more varied surprise builds competitive, which will actually make multiplayer better. You know, one of the reasons in a recent tournament I picked Clan Angren over the dwarfs is because I have access to those ethereal units, and my opponents would have to consider that when they're doing their build, that I might bring ethereal units. If you just make it the dwarfs can have this, the Tomb Kings can have this, you know, they're just one faction, you can actually make it so the armies that each faction can bring are a little more varied and a little more difficult to guess, which will make the games more interesting, and you just can't have a one simple build to beat them all type of thing. I mean, that'll always be there, but it is what it is. So number 9, impose more unit limits. So tournament rule sets are doing a great job of this so far. Like, for example, no more of 5 of this unit type, etc. They already have the logic in the game, and use that as part of the balancing mechanic. You know, it's a great thing to do. It's easy, and it'll stop, you know, kind of cancer builds, or reduce them at least a little bit. But I think this is kind of an interesting way to look at it, and you don't have to be, you know, really strict on everything, but just to minimize some of the more silly builds and the more unfun builds that you might see. But this could be a balancing mechanic as well, as far as unit limits. You know, the free-to-play model. So this is something I thought about because I played a lot of games that have it, but allow a free download of the multiplayer structure only. None of the campaign stuff. You know, make it light on the computer, make it simple. And you could, again, I don't know what the right thing to do is, but this is just some ideas. When you download it, you get 1 free faction, maybe Empire, or 4 free factions, you know, Empire, Vampire Counts, Dwarfs, and Greenskins, all the Game 1 factions that you can play in multiplayer. Maybe. I don't know how you structure this, but you give an entry level to anyone who just wants to try the game or play it for free. When you get that, you get no Regiments of Renown to start. You get Empire, but you don't get the Regiments of Renown, but you can unlock those regiments through some gameplay. Maybe you play one game played equals you get the Sterling's Revenge. I don't know. 10 games played or 10 wins and you get the Hammer of the Witches. Whatever it is. Some sort of, you know, you start and you play your way through. And if you play through the PvE section, maybe you get Regiments of Renown. I'm going to go over that in a second. So you can have also possibly random faction selection play. So let's say you download the game and you can only play as Empire as far as, you know, picking which armies you're going to play, but you might be able to play 1 Skaven mode game per day, and that'll give you a random faction, or you can unlock a single match with a faction per day. Say you want to use your single match to play as the faction X, Y, or Z. I don't know. Something like this, so it can allow players to get in to the game. Purchasable factions that can be gained completely through play, and a lot of it. So maybe you play $3 for the Beastmen, or you have to play X amount of games to unlock the Beastmen, and then go through like that. Now, this works for World of Tanks. You know, to get to tier 10 takes a very long time, but you can do it, and you do not need anything else except for gameplay to get there. You know, maybe they don't do that. Maybe they just have the 4 free or 1 free or whatever, but you got to have some element of a free-to-play model, I think, to make multiplayer, in this case, open it up to the masses, if you will. So you get a free-to-play model. I think you need to put a lot of effort into tutorials for new players, which will lead to a PvE mode, and I'll discuss that later, and then to competitive. So it's a good way to allow free-to-play players to experience other factions and armies if they do not have them yet through tutorials and a PvE mode, and it's a good way to ease new players into commanding their armies so they can have more fun. So PvE mode for armies. So this is something that Hearthstone, I think, did a great job of if you played Hearthstone. It's just like Hearthstone Dungeons. So you create runs per faction that can be played on all levels, easy through legendary. So maybe it's just a 4 battle set for the vampire counts, that are lore appropriate battles or a lore appropriate kind of quote unquote campaign that you can play on easy. You pick your army as the vampire counts and what you're going to play, and then you play through the 4 battles, and then you can win it on easy, normal, hard, very hard, and legendary. And maybe if you win it on legendary, you can get a title that shows up, the legendary vampire, Sioux Devil, whatever you want. But it's a good way to allow players to play against the computer in PvE mode, to learn the commands, and just something fun to do. I mean, I would love to do that, to play like that as a mode. I think it would be just fun and unique, and you could put these out, once every 2 months, once every month. I mean, these things wouldn't be hard to build. I mean, they have the maps, they have the armies. You just make a set of for a campaign of 4 battles or 5 battles or 6 battles or 3 battles, whatever they want, and they can release it as a fun bit of content to keep players interesting. What'll happen. Players will write the best possible builds for beating this on legendary, and people will discuss that, and it's just interesting. It's a great place to tune your skills as a new player. So maps. This is a big one. So maps must be custom designed to be fair no matter which side you're on. They really need to spend a lot of time on maps. They just can't be flat maps either. So I think they need to be on the small side to promote faster games and to promote a possible expanding boundary, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Low computer overhead to allow more computers into the game. So when they look at their maps, do what they need to do to give it low overhead if they can. Varied to allow special unit abilities like Strider, Aquatic, Forest Dwellers, whatever, to be useful. As pretty as you can make them without costing lots of computer overhead. So this is important. When it comes to this multiplayer, I still see people playing Rome multiplayer, and it's just on a flat map. It's ugly as hell, but they're playing it anyway. So I think you could easily have 6 maps as a rotation, as long as they were good maps, fair maps, interesting maps, and had some terrain, some water, some trees, depending on the map. Maybe as many as 10 maps, as long as you make them. And you could make them pretty on high settings, but I think this is important, that making the maps beautiful is less important than making them cost low overhead for computers. And you can make the pretty part of your settings. So number 6 is maps that move the edges as armies collide to avoid camping. I don't know how easy that would be, but I think it could be. It could certainly be done. So basically make the battle map start much smaller than it is, and let the boundaries be set by the positions of the heroes or the lords in some sort of moving radius. That way you can't line camp, you can't corner camp. You move your army and the boundary moves. Now maybe you could move your army fast enough to get to an absolute corner somewhere, maybe there's terrain, but the idea being that you mitigate the chances of people trying to exploit game mechanics in competitive. Maybe it can't be done all the way. Maybe it's not reasonable to do it, but I think it should be pretty easy that, you just have the white lines around the map. Depending on where the armies are, you expand where those white lines go. If you have a map that is, say, 4x4, let's just call it 4x4, 4 units of what I don't know, but it's 4x4, the whole map can expand to 10x10, depending on which way the armies go. You will generally minimize that. Plus, if you have a rampage mechanic coming at 10 minutes, you can corner camp all you like. If someone just doesn't want to play your corner campy game, they just let the rampage mechanic take over, and your units that are farthest away from the battle will just rampage, and then the battle can really begin, and they can try and use those 20-second intervals and understanding the rampage mechanic to win the game effectively. Whatever you want to do. All maps should have competitive Vanguard deployment zones, so it should be more of a strategy. I know there's some maps where the Vanguard deployment zones are not that great. You can't go on the edges, etc. But yeah, think about Vanguard, because it's a cool part of the game. So make good competitive and complete Vanguard deployment zones that are interesting, so it's more of a strategy and a tactic. So I think it should be easy to do. So rewards, this is a big one. And a lot of free-to-play games, or just games in general, multiplayer have really good reward systems that are like not monetary or pay to win or anything like that, but you can do it pretty easily. So custom rating skins, stars around your faction. It's like 3-star in your tank barrel. Stars to show off your faction symbol or your rating, or a hue around the edges. There's plenty of non-intrusive ways to show off your prowess, and that is important when you're in competition. It's kind of like a puffing out your chest and whatever it is. That's important. It's a symbol of your prowess, and it's easy to do. And people will play for this to get the custom skins or stars around your faction, or 5-star your faction, or get a silver hue around, or a gold hue, or a diamond hue, whatever it is. Custom skins for units, this would be huge. It's pretty easy to do and massive draw for many. Like if I could get custom skins for my dwarfs so that I could show them off in game, where my dwarf warriors would have some custom skins or custom symbols on their shields or something like that, I would do it. I would get every one. And I know there's lots of people that would. Tons of people. Some won't care. I get it. Some could care less, and it doesn't make a difference to the gameplay whether your dwarf has a mug symbol on their shield or some other symbol, but it's something that is worth working towards for that progression. So yeah, some people will collect every custom skin for every faction, so it shows up in their army, like a golden gun or something like that, or something special for a lord, or whatever it is. There's so many great examples of how to do this in modern multiplayer games. It's crazy. So yeah, lots of games. So lots of examples from other games. So 3-marking your gun, golden guns, custom skins. There's tons of examples that are all great and they're all fun. I guess as long as you don't have random loot boxes, just stay away from that for now, forever. Promote the game. Like this is important. Like CA doesn't promote multiplayer in general. They really don't. And I'm not saying they have never talked about multiplayer, but promoting the game is much different than what they do. So you could promote both competitive. You could promote both competitive mode and themed mode. So with events and tournaments for the best player in the world, you could do that once a year at, maybe an E3 event or a Warhammer World event, whatever it is. You could do something like that once a year or once a quarter, or at various games conferences or whatever. You could have some sort of competition. The prizes don't have to be massive to get players in. Like you could have the best player in the world win 10 grand for your first year just to try it out to see how it did. But you sponsor that tournament, promote it, and make it interesting. The second thing is you could have themed tournaments. Now this is what I would be interested in. For the best faction players in the world representing their factions, and the fans cheering for that faction. Now I've never cosplayed, but if there was something that could make me dress up like an ale-swilling dwarf carrying a big plastic hammer in public, this would be it. To cheer for the best dwarf player in the world in a faction tournament. Just imagine how fun this could be if you had a faction tournament where, people would come as zombies, people would come as lizard men, people would come as chaos, and you could have the fans cheering, you could have a cosplay competition, you could have a really fun sort of battles, and you could have, I could just imagine the cheers of your representative dwarf player coming onto stage, all the dwarfs going nuts for him. Then comes out, like the Empire, and, there would be no fans there, so it would be quiet, there'd be crickets, but it would be great for the dwarf player. That's how I imagine it. So Games Workshop and CA could truly collaborate at events like this, promoting tabletop and other Warhammer games. The possibilities seem endless for fun and business. Like, if they did something like that, they could collaborate on Vermintide, on Blood Bowl, on all these kinds of things. Like, you could easily, because Warhammer is such a massive IP, you could have, maybe this is a Warhammer, this is a Games Workshop-led concept, but the possibility for business and fun and cross-promoting are really big. And so promoting the game, you could have crazy events like week-long specials for a special skin. There's lots of great references to other games here. You see Hearthstone does a really great job at kind of events and stuff like that. So balance patches. So balance is really important in multiplayer, but you got to do it frequently. You just have to, I think, to balance the game. So small balance patches monthly, maybe big ones quarterly. Maybe you do a season, but this game will never truly be balanced, nor should it be. I think it's important to understand that, as every faction does and should have hard counters and should be the same to other factions. However, small tweaks should be frequent. And that's just like even if you have 6 units change by a small amount in their price or a couple stats here and there, just to continuously be balancing it, I think is important. Balance fast in multiplayer with unit cost and in campaign with upkeep. So I just decouple these two things and it'll work fine. So right now they always have I think your unit upkeep as a straight ratio of the unit's cost. Just decouple them, make them separate entries, so that in multiplayer you can change the cost of the unit really quickly without affecting the balance in campaign. Or decouple them completely, make it 2 different games. I don't know what the right thing would be to do there, but anyways, also let the rage happen without feeding the trolls. So as soon as if you have an influx of 100 times as many players into the multiplayer scene, or 1,000 times as many players into the multiplayer scene, the trolls will come out in full force and there's going to be rage everywhere. Just let it happen. Don't worry about it, because the game will be better for everybody, especially the people that are committed to the game. If you can play as many games as fast as you want against any faction you want, I would be happy as a pig in shit. It's just it's a great idea, but understand the consequences. As soon as you have a lot of people playing and you introduce a big free to play contingent, you're still going to get great players who are awesome people who are fun to hang around, but you'll also get a lot more trolls in there, and it's going to happen. Don't worry about it. Let players in on your balancing principles. So this, I think, is important, and it's easy to do. So you say if CA were to say this is how we are balancing the game and we make our passes and this is how we think, though players may disagree with your action or your principles or how you do it, if they can predict it, it's much more palatable. So that will just reduce a little bit of rage and whatever, but some little things. So these are not big things, but these are just little observations. Basically, make it so your units do not leave the group or change their position in your bottom card when they route. This is super annoying to me. When my unit routes, it leaves the group and it comes back and I have to regroup it or find it. I don't even know where it is. This could help the game a lot. So they are where they are. They are where they belong until they shatter or disappear. Period. Alright, that's just a little thing. Make it so when abilities are up, the unit card flashes or something similar as a visual cue. Don't make it so I have to actively go and see if my Rune of Wrath and Rune is up. Make it so that my unit card just starts flashing, or something flashes above it, or something like that. So I just have a better visual cue as to when abilities are up. You can do the same with magic, or, stand your ground, anything like that. I think it'll just make the game a little better, and particularly better to players like me who don't have good micro, and especially new players. So add more vocal cues so that winning or losing engagements is more visceral and intense. So they do have some, but only when the unit is routing. I would love to hear more vocal cues, more audible cues that, your one unit is winning, or, something that would just make the game more intuitive and visceral based on audible cues. I think you could do some work on that. And that's about it. So that's, my notes. I have more thoughts on this. I've been adding to these notes for months in my phone, and I haven't really structured them really, really well. I've just kind of put down some of my notes. Basically, I just want to put out some of my thoughts. I would really love to see this game expand its multiplayer mode, and it is the best opportunity that CA has ever had in a game to do that, because the factions are so varied and so interesting, and the game itself is based on an IP that is 100% multiplayer and balanced around that. So if this game could be bigger in the multiplayer only sense than it is in campaign, because I've heard CA state that only 5% of their player base plays multiplayer. as a, I'm not sure if that's the exact quote or number, but I've heard that many times, that multiplayer is not really a big thing for their player base. Whereas this could be that only 5% of their player base is campaign. I mean, that's how big the Warhammer IP is. They really could be that massive a level of change and difference. And maybe the business model is pretty simple, where you pay for a faction, $3 for Beastmen, or $10 for Beastmen, or $6, whatever it is. Or you have some other ways to generate revenue, because that's important for the business model. But there's always that, the bigger a game is in and of itself, the more revenue potential it has. So getting the game out to more people, helps the IP for Games Workshop, because other games will be more successful, because it just builds their brand. And it helps CA. If you increase the reach of this game from, I don't know, maybe there's 5 million people who know about this game, 10 million people, maybe there's 1 million people. I don't know what it is, that how many people in this world know about this game, Total War Warhammer. If you expand that reach by 10 times, you expand the reach of all your other products. So, there's more than just the straight, okay, I'm going to charge $3 a faction, and this is going to be just a simple business model for generating revenue off the IPs of Warhammer and Total War series. But it can expand that really significantly and build a customer base for future products for both Creative Assembly and for Games Workshop. So I'd really love to see it. And I just want to see, I don't care about their business model as much. I mean, I support all their games, and I've bought every little bit of DLC. You have to support the games you love. You have to support the few things you love in this world, or they just disappear. That's just the way it is. So I even though I'm never going to play the Wood Elves, I bought the Wood Elf DLC. I'm never going to play the Beastmen. I bought the Beastmen DLC because so I can support the game that I love. And, this is selfish for me. I would just like multiplayer to flourish and be better, and to see more interesting modes, things that I can't even think about now. Again, I'll go back and just summarize and say this is not absolutes. I'm not saying this is how the game must be to succeed, or if the game does this, it will succeed. It's really a discussion, and it's some points that I think could be useful to discuss, and I would love to see CA and Games Workshop get together and say, listen, how could we make this game explode to the benefit of both our companies and to the benefit of all our players, so there's more enjoyment and more fun to be had. So want to hear some comments down below. I love comments in every video, but this one's, I think comments are really important. If you hung around and went through the notes, this is, you're someone who likes to think through these things, and you'll have some thoughts of your own for sure, and I really want to hear them so I can consider what other people are thinking about multiplayer. I would love to kind of hear ideas, basic other ways that could help expand the multiplayer player base or multiplayer experience, even if it's different from what I've said, just ideas that might really help expand this side of the game, or make it more interesting to watch, to play, or an easier path for a new player to go from not even knowing what Warhammer is or Total War is to being competent at the game and getting enjoyment out of the game. I really want to hear those things and look forward to the comments. That's all I have to say for now, so I will see you soon.